Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we will be learning today Mir Hashem Daf Kuf Bem Aleph Amid Beis. We continue to learn Hilchos Tefillah. We're learning the halachos of Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם. We're in Siman Kuf Yod Daled. We pick up today on Kuf Bem Aleph Amid Beis. Siman Kuf Yod Daled Sif Beis. 2 lines from the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Mechaber Sif Beis. Well, before we actually read Sif Beis, let's just remind ourselves that in Sif Aleph we learned that we begin to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם by Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. We had a lengthy discussion in the Mishnah Berurah if Shmini Atzeres is the proper time to begin saying Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם. Why do we begin by Musaf on the day of Shmini Atzeres? We know that in halacha the day always begins the night before. Why not begin by Ma'ariv of Shmini Atzeres? The Mishnah Berurah explained we don't want to start by Ma'ariv because back in the day, for certain, there were many people who did not go out to shul by Ma'ariv, and therefore they would not know that the tzibur is starting to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם. Not everybody had calendars with printed on them. Tonight we start saying Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם. If they went to shul and the Gabbai gave a klap, Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם, they knew. If not. So you would have people davening at home who would not say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם. You would people davening in shul who would say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם. And that would be a problem of lois iskaidu, al tasem agudais agudais. Klal Yisrael is not supposed to be broken up into groups, some doing this and some doing that. So we can't start by Ma'ariv. Why don't we start by Shachris? So we explained, and this is very negaya to what we're going to learn now. We explained that the tzibur, no one is allowed to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם until there is a hacharaza in the tzibur, until an announcement is made by tzibur that it is time to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem. Now, before Shmoneh Esrei of Shachris, you're not able to make that announcement. When are you going to make the announcement? In the middle of Pesukei Zimra, you're not allowed to be mafsik. In the middle of Berachas Kriyas Shema, you can't be mafsik. Between Berachas Kriyas Shema and Shmoneh Esrei, you can't be mafsik, because between Gal Yisrael and Shmoneh Esrei, you can't be mafsik. You have to be masmich geula l'tfila. So when are you going to make the announcement? You're going to make the announcement by Berachas HaShachar, so you're going to make the announcement 45 minutes before you hit Shmoneh Esrei of Shachris. That doesn't make any sense. The announcement has to be made right before Shmoneh Esrei. And you can't make the announcement right before the Shmoneh Esrei of Shachris. Therefore, we postpone the beginning of Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם until Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. And before Musaf, the Gabbai gives a klap, and the Gabbai says Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם. Now everybody knows it's time to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשם, and everybody will say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem. You won't have a problem of some people saying it and some people not. It is here in Sif Beis that we actually learn this halacha that you're not allowed to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem until it is announced in the tzibur. Says the Mechaber Sif Beis, Asur lahazkir hageshem, you're not allowed to mention geshem, so you're not allowed to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem ad sheyachriz ashliach tzibur, until the shliach tzibur makes the announcement that it is now time to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem. Says the Ramah, V'yesh Oimrim, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that these words V'yesh Oimrim are a tos sefer, they're a typo. It shouldn't be V'yesh Oimrim. V'yesh Oimrim sounds like the Ramah is bringing down a dissenting opinion. Says the Mishnah Berurah, there's no argument over here. The Mechaber just said you're not allowed to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem until it's announced by the Gabbai or by the Shliach Tzibur, but until it's announced b'tzibur that it's time to say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem. In reaction to that, says the Ramah, shekoidem shemaschil in Musaf, before we begin the Shtil Shmoneh Esrei of Musaf, machriz hashamish, the shamish, the Gabbai calls out Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem, kedei shehatzibur yaskiru b'tfilasan, so that the entire tzibur should say Masiv, Harach, ומוריד, הגשem in their Shtil Shmoneh Esrei, and says the Ramah v'chei noagin, and that indeed is the minig. Okay, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah back in Kuf Bem Aleph Amud Aleph. Mishnah Berurah is cotton dalit aser lahazkir. Ritzarna loymar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, afilu hatzibur shemispalelin tfilas musaf. We said in Sif Aleph, when do you begin to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem? By Musaf on Shmini Atzeres. Now, says the Mechaber, when the Tzibur goes to daven the Shtil Shmon Esrei of Musaf, Asur and Lahazkir Geshem, they're not allowed to mention Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem im lo yichriz hashliach tzibur ay hashamish kaidam atfila, unless the Gabbai or the Shliach Tzibur made an announcement before the Shtil Shmon Esrei. So yes, in Sif Aleph, the Mechaber said, when do you start saying Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem? Musaf by Shmini Atzeres. So when should you start? By the Shtil Shmon Esrei of Musaf. However, you can't start unless somebody makes an announcement, Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. If they do not make an announcement, then the tzibur should not say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in their Shtil Shmon Esrei. They'll have to wait until Chazaras Hashatz. By Chazaras Hashatz, the Chazan will say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. That will serve as the Hachraza. That will be the announcement. And then the tzibur will start saying Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shmon Esrei of Mincha. But that's all a b'diavad. Really, like the Ramah says, what's supposed to happen? Before the Shtil Shmon Esrei of Musaf, the Gabbai, the Shamish, is supposed to make an announcement. Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Then everybody will say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem already in their Shtil Shmon Esrei of Musaf. U'kamoshe mefarish haRamah. V'chein, and similarly, continues the Chavetz Chaim, HaShliach Tzibur gam kein lo yazkir. The Shliach Tzibur himself also cannot say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in his Shtil Shmon Esrei. Rak kishem espal b'kol ram, he could only say it in his Chazaras Hashatz, aval loy b'tfilas halachos, but not in the Shtil Shmon Esrei, kevan shelo huchraz mikaydem atfila, if it was not announced before the Shtil Shmon Esrei. So again, I want to be very clear, because this could be a little bit confusing. Do you say it in the Shtil Shmon Esrei? Do you not say it in the Shtil Shmon Esrei? The answer is, Al Pi Sif Aleph here in Kuf Yod Daled, the proper time to start saying Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem is Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. Therefore, really, everybody should say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shmon Esrei of Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. However, in order to do that, the Shamish, the Gabbai, somebody has to give a klap and has to make an announcement before the Shtil Shmon Esrei, Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Then everybody could say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in their Shtil Shmon Esrei. Sai the Tzibur, sai the Chazan. But what if nobody makes the announcement? If nobody made the announcement, then nobody can say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in their Shtil Shmon Esrei of Musaf. Not the Tzibur, not the Shatz. Nobody. What will happen in that case? By Chazaras Hashatz, then the Chazan will say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. That will serve as the Hachraza. That will be the announcement. And then everybody will say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shmon Esrei of Mincha. Now, the Chavetz Chaim throws out another possibility. Let's say it's time for Musaf on Shmini Atzeres, and the Gabbai was half asleep, and the Gabbai failed to make the announcement. Oh, now everybody starts the Shtil Shmon Esrei, and the first guy who gets up to Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, he remembers, wait a second, Musaf Shmini Atzeres was supposed to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. So he goes ahead and he says Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem out loud, right? He's davening his Shtil Shmon Esrei. Ooh, Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, right? How many times do you hear on Rosh Chodesh in Shul, half the people in Shul say Yalav Yavai out loud to remind everybody to say Yalav Yavai. So this fellow reached Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem and he called it out loud. Does that serve as a hachraza? Since Ploini Almoini in the Shul said Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, is that now a hachraza? And now everyone else who did not yet get up to Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, they should say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem? Or maybe this fellow in shul has no official standing, and his Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem out loud does not serve as a hachraza. And the truth is, in light of what we learned yesterday, there's a very good argument to make for that, and that is, if Pliny Almoni in shul says Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem out loud, there are going to be some people who are already past Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. There are going to be some people who did not yet get up to Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. So now what's going to happen? The people who hear him and didn't get up to Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem yet, they'll say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. But the people who are already up to Ata Kadosh, they're not going to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Now it's going to be agudos. Now you're going to have to see, you're going to have half the tzibur doing this way, half the tzibur doing that way. That could be problematic. So we definitely could see an argument why this shouldn't work. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. Umikam Bidi Evid, Imamar Echad B'Kol Ram B'Seik Filasa Morid HaGashem. If one fellow in shul says out loud, in middle of his Shemoneh Esrei, when he gets up to Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, he says Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem out loud, Av she'asar lases kain, even though this fellow, it was asr what he did. Because what did we just learn? You're not allowed to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem unless you heard an announcement. Now this fellow didn't hear an announcement, so how is he saying Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem? He's not allowed to. Av she'asar lases kain, sheharei lo shama min hashliach tzibur, because there was no hachraza, so he wasn't allowed to say it. Nevertheless, once he said it, and he said it out loud, says the Mishnah Berurah, mutarim hashoymim lahaski b'tfilasa. Now, the other people who heard it from him would be allowed to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, dezu gufa ka'achraza dami, because his saying it out loud will serve as the hachraza. Kein kasav ha'chayodam. So says the Chayodam. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the nearer lead, it seems to me, that if somebody who was not yet up to Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, and now he heard this fellow say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, and he, the one who's listening, does not say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem, ain't tzrichen lachzor. He doesn't have to repeat Shemoneh Esrei. The yesh paiskim shesovrim, because there are paiskim that hold the hachraza loy mikri, because it's not considered an hachraza, ela in dain shehichriz kud kaidam atvila, unless it's called out and announced before Shemoneh Esrei, ay sheshamu mishliach tzibur chazaras atvila shes kegeshem, or you hear it from the chazan in the chazaras hashatz. V'achayodam ganken loy ka'amarak shemutarin lahazkir. Even the chayodam, the words of the Chayodam says, if somebody in shul said Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem out loud, it's mutter for you to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. But Avaloisha Chayavim, but he doesn't say that once you heard somebody say it out loud, you're chayiv to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. That he doesn't say. Eis Katan Hey, V'yesh Oimrim Shekaidim, says the Mishnah Berurah Taz Sefer, who, like I told you when we learned the Ramah inside, these words V'yesh Oimrim are a Taz Sefer. They're a typo. V'tzarech Laimar, what it should say is Pirush, the explanation of the Mechaber. The Mechaber says it's also to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem until the Shliach Tzibur calls out Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Says the Ramah, what the Mechaber means is that really before the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei of Musaf, someone is supposed to make a hachraza. The Gabbai is supposed to call out Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Vein ka machloikis klal. But there's no machloikis here. The Ramah is not arguing on the Mechaber. So what do we have here so far in Siv Beis? It's usher to say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem until the Gabbai calls out Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Says the Ramah, therefore the Gabbai is supposed to make the announcement before the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei. Then everybody will say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei. If the Gabbai fails to call it out, then no one can say Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei. Everyone will have to wait until they hear Mashiv Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Chazaras Hashatz from the Chazan by Musaf, and then they'll say it by Mincha in the Stille Shmoneh Esrei. The Chavetz Chaim threw out, what if somebody goes ahead, there was no announcement, and somebody in his Stille Shmoneh Esrei says Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGashim out loud. It's usher for him to do that, because he has no right to say Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGashim, because there was no hachraza. So he has no right to say Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGashim. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings the Chai Adam. Once this fellow did so, anybody who heard is allowed to say Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGashim. But, as the Chavetz Chaim points out, they're allowed to, but they're not mechuyev to. Ois Katan Vav, Mashiv Haruach. If you look in the Ramah says, V'yesh oimrim shekoidem shemaskil and Musaf, before the Shtil Shmoneh Esrei of Musaf, Machriz HaShamish, the Shamish calls out Mashiv Haruach. And then it says V'chule. V'chule is like etc. So the Ramah does not spell out the full phrase. He doesn't say Mashiv Haruach HaMorid HaGashim. He says Mashiv Haruach. He says V'chule. Points out the Mishnah Berurah, Ayin B'Chai Adam. He says, take a look at the Chai Adam. Shehiz here, who warns us. Shaloi laso is k'moi shenoyegen. We should not do like the erroneous minig that some places have. Shamachrizin rak mashiv haruach, where the gabbai who makes the announcement gives a clap and he just says mashiv haruach, but he doesn't say u'marid HaGashim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that's an error. Why? Shezeloi nikra hachraza. That does not constitute a valid hachraza. Shaharei b'yesh b'kaimais oimrim gam b'kayetz mashiv haruach. Because we're going to see later on that there were places that had the minig that all year long, even in the summer, even in the Yomais HaChama, the spring and the summer months, they would say Mashiv HaRuach. They would say Ata Gibor Lo'elam Hashem Echai Meisam Ata Rav Lo Yishia Mashiv HaRuach. And then they would go weiter. So they just, during the spring and summer months, they dropped Umayrid HaGashim. But Mashiv HaRuach, they said all year long. In that case, what are you accomplishing by announcing Mashiv HaRuach? You're not accomplishing anything. You're only accomplishing something if you announce Umayrid HaGashim. So says the Chavetz Chaim, don't make a mistake from this Ramah and think that the proper announcement is Mashiv HaRuach. No, you need Mashiv HaRuach Umayrid HaGashim. Okay. Let's go back to the top line in the Shulchan Aruch. Continues the Mechaber. Hilkach, therefore, now that we have seen that it is asur to say Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGashim until you've heard a hachraza from the Gabbai, or you heard it from the Shleach Tzibur in the Chazar Hashatz. Hilkach, therefore, even if somebody is ill, or he has some other kind of oinus, so somebody's in shul, and they finished Kriyas HaTorah, and somebody's getting up to sing Kakeli, right? We're dealing with Shmini Atzeres, and somebody has an oinus, somebody has an emergency, he has to run out, he can't stay in shul. Its davening was taking much longer than expected, and he must leave. So he wants to daven Musaf right now. He doesn't want to wait. They're not up there. They're probably Kakeli. They have a chazan doing a chazanus. It's going to take another half hour until they get up to the Shtil Shmoneh Esrei of Musaf. He wants to daven the Shtil Shmoneh Esrei of Musaf right now. But if he davens the Shtil Shmoneh Esrei of Musaf right now, he can't say Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGashim because they didn't make the announcement yet. So what's he going to do? He's going to have to daven Musaf without Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGashim. But that's not really proper, because really you're supposed to say Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGashim already by Musaf. So he's kind of caught in a quandary. Therefore, says the Mechaber Hilkach, even if you have somebody who is ill, or he has some other type of oinus, he should not go ahead and daven before the tzibur davens. Because he can't say Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGashim until he hears an announcement in the tzibur, or at least until the chazan says Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGashim to Chazar Hashatz. Aval, however, im yodeya shehichriz shliach tzibur, but let's say what this guy decides to do therefore is, he says, all right, I'm not going to daven Musaf now. I'm going to go wherever I have to go, I'm not going to daven Musaf yet. I'm going to go take care of whatever I have to take care of. The Zman Tfilas Musaf is Kol Hayoim. So later on in the day, I'll daven Musaf. Now, I'll daven Musaf 2 hours after the tzibur already daven Musaf. So if I'm davening Musaf 2 hours after the tzibur daven Musaf, I'm sure either the Gabbai made an announcement, Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem, or even if he didn't, when the Chazan got up to Chazaras Hashatz, he said Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. So says the Mechaber, Avalim Yodeya Shehichri Shliach Tzibur, if you know, if by the time you're ready to daven Musaf B'Yechidus, you know that the Shliach Tzibur already davened Chazaras Hashatz and he said Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem, you don't have to have Edus that he said Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. It's Shmini Atzeres. You know that he said Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. So if you know that it was already announced B'tzibur, because it's 2 hours after they davened Musaf, Afa Pishahu Lo Shama, even though you personally did not hear the announcement, Mazkir, then you could say Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. So again, what's the halacha here? The halacha here is, if you expected davening Shmini Atzeres to be over at 10 o'clock, and now you see that it's 10 o'clock and they didn't even hit Musaf yet, and they're not going to hit Musaf until 10:30, and you have an oinus, you can't hang around there anymore, and you want to daven Musaf at 10 o'clock, you're stuck in a quandary. You can't daven Musaf now because you can't say Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem, because you didn't hear an announcement, and an announcement wasn't made yet. But if you want, you could postpone your davening of Musaf. Maybe you'll go run, take care of whatever your emergency is, and now you want to daven Musaf at 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, you know that the tzibur already finished davening Musaf. So they announced Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem, and the Chazan said Chazaras Hashatz said he said Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. Now you could daven Musaf B'Yechidus at home, and you could say Mashiv Urach U'Morid HaGoshem. Umitamzeh, and based on this, says the Mechaber, Habal Beis HaKnesses, somebody who comes to shul, V'atzibur hischilu lehispalel. Let's tweak the case a little bit. They finished you're davening in the shul. They finished Kriyas HaTorah. They finished Maftir and the Haftarah, and now the Rav is speaking, and you had to run out. Maybe you had to go to the Beis HaKisei or whatever it is. You went out. And now when you come back into shul, the tzibur is already davening the Shtil Shmon Esrei. Now, you didn't hear any announcement, so you're going to start davening Shmon Esrei now. Should you say Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem Amat? The answer is, yes, you should. Why? Because it's Shmini Atzeres. And that's when you start saying Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. You didn't hear an announcement? Yeah, but you're davening in a shul, and you know that every year, before the Shtil Shmon Esrei of Musaf, the Gabbai gives a clap, and he says, Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. So you're fully allowed to assume that announcement was made. And therefore, in your Shtil Shmon Esrei, you're going to say, Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem. So again, Umitam Zeh, Habal Beis HaKnesses V'atzibur Hischilu Lehispalel, Yispalel, you should daven, you're still a Shmon Esrei, v'yaskir, and say Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem, afapi shehu lo yishama mishleach tzibur, even though you personally did not hear the announcement from the Shliach Tzibur. Let's go here into the Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Zayin. What did the Mechaber say? The Mechaber said, Hilkoch, since you're not allowed to say Mashiv Urach Amar Dagoshem until there's an announcement, therefore, said the Mechaber, Af im hu chayla ay onus. Even if the person is a chayla, he's ill, or he has some other kind of onus that is driving him to daven his Shtil Shmon Esrei earlier, before the rest of the tzibur, so he should not do it. He should postpone his Shtil Shmon Esrei. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Pirush, what's the explanation of this af im hu, even if he's a chayla or an onus? Explains the Chofetz Chaim, dim eina chayla, if we're not talking about somebody who's ill, or somebody who has some other kind of pressing onus, of course you're not allowed to start you're in shul. What are you doing davening Musaf before they are? You have a chiyuv of tefillah b'tzibur. Wait until the tzibur starts Musaf and daven with them. You're never allowed to just be makdim your Shtil Shmon Esrei. Elamai, the Mechaber is talking about a case where there's something driving him. He's a chayla or an onus. That's what's making him want to daven his Shtil Shmon Esrei early. But in this case, he can't. He can't daven early because he's stuck. He's not going to be up to say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim. Va'afilu im hu mispal bebeisai. Let's say somebody didn't go to shul at all. Somebody woke up and he's sick. He's not feeling well. So he's davening at home b'yechidus. Okay, you're not going to shul today. It's the first day, Shmini, it's Shmini Atzeres. You know that you have to start saying Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim today. But if you got up early and you're davening early, you can't say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim yet, because they didn't announce it in the tzibur yet. You're not allowed to say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim before the tzibur. And therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, B'nei HaYishuvim, people who live out in the boondocks, in the small villages, Kishemispalalin Beloy Minyan, if they're going to daven without a minyan, Yamtinu b'Shmini Atzeres milhispal Musaf, on Shmini Atzeres they should wait to daven Musaf ad samach l'soif sheish sha'os, almost until Chatzos, almost until the end of the 6th hour. Because by that time certainly the tzibur davened the Musaf, and now you could rest assured that Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim was either announced or it was said by Chazaras Hashatz, and now you could daven b'yechidus in your house, you could daven Musaf, and you could say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim. I think if you live in a town where they have a Vasikin minyan, so once it's past the time that the Vasikin minyan would have hit Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim, I would think that you could probably rely on that. Even though this person himself did not hear the announcement, he personally didn't hear the announcement, but he knows the announcement was made. He has the right to assume that the announcement was made, and therefore he could daven Shemon Esrei, and he could say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim, because the default, the assumption is that it was announced already. Okay. Now we go 4 lines down, middle of a line in the Shulchan Aruch Siv Gimel. Now we start getting to some of the shilas that come up, especially at the change of the season, Shmini Atzeres time, right after Yom Tiv, when it's time to start saying Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim. People aren't used to it yet, so we start to have shilas that come up. I said it, I didn't say it, I might have said it. Says the Mechaber Siv Gimel. Im Amar Mashiv Haruach B'Yamos Hachama, the Rama puts in. If somebody said Mashiv Haruach, now, if you notice, it does not say over here Mashiv Haruach V'chule. It doesn't say Mashiv Haruach, etc. And that's because over here the Mechaber does not mean that somebody said Mashiv Haruach U'morid HaGoshem. The Mechaber now is detailing a case where somebody said Mashiv Haruach alone, without U'morid HaGoshem, and he said it during the spring and summer season. Now, in the world of the Mechaber, a Sfardi, we're assuming something akin to Nusach Svard, but Minig Svarad, which is that during the spring and summer months, right, between Pesach and between the first day of Pesach and Shmini Atzeres, they say Morid Hatol. During the Mois HaGeshamim, during the winter months, between Shmini Atzeres and Pesach, then they drop Morid Hatol and they say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim. What happened over here is, it's between Pesach and Shmini Atzeres, so it's during the season that you're supposed to say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim. But this person failed to say Mashiv Harach Amar Nagashim. Instead, he only said Mashiv Harach, the one who makes the winds blow, but he didn't mention rain. So says the Mechaber, Im Amar Mashiv Harach B'Yamos Hachama. If somebody was davening Shemon Esrei, and all he said was Mashiv Harach, and this is during the spring and summer months. It's between Pesach and Shmini Atzeres. Or another case, Lo Yamaroi B'Yamos HaGeshamim. Or somebody failed to say Mashiv Haruach during the rainy season, between Shmini Atzeres and Pesach, when you're supposed to say Mashiv Haruach Amar Nagashim. This fellow failed to say Mashiv Haruach. He didn't say Mashiv Haruach. He said Morid HaGoshem. but he did not say Mashiv HaRuach. So he said, but he didn't say Mashiv HaRuach. So again, two cases over here. One case is during the summer months, when in the world of the Mechaber you should have said Morid Atol, but this person said Mashiv HaRuach. He didn't say Morid HaGoshem, but he said Mashiv HaRuach. That's case number one. Case number two, during the rainy season, when you're supposed to say Mashiv HaRuach or Morid HaGoshem, during the rainy season, he didn't say Morid HaGoshem. He just said, he said Morid HaGoshem, but he did not say Mashiv HaRuach. So again, during the summer season, he said Mashiv HaRuach. Now, during the summer season, you're supposed to say Morid Atol. You're not supposed to say Mashiv HaRuach. You're not supposed to say Morid HaGoshem. Now, he didn't say Morid HaGoshem, but he said Mashiv HaRuach. Or during the winter months, when you're supposed to say Mashiv HaRuach or Morid HaGoshem, he said Morid HaGoshem, but he failed to say Mashiv HaRuach. So these two cases ride on Mashiv HaRuach. In the first case, you said Mashiv HaRuach when you were not supposed to. You said Mashiv HaRuach during the summer months. In the second case, you did not say Mashiv HaRuach when you were supposed to. You were supposed to say Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaGoshem. You said Morid HaGoshem, you didn't say Mashiv HaRuach. So, in the words of the Mechaber, Im Amar Mashiv HaRuach b'mais HaChama, or you failed to say Mashiv HaRuach b'mais HaGeshamim during the rainy season. In both of those cases, says the Mechaber, Ein machzirin oisai, you don't make this person repeat either the bracha of Mechayim Mesim, or if he went weiter in Shemona Esrei, you do not make him repeat Shemona Esrei. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cutting yod. Mashiv HaRuach. Ritzayin Aloymar. What the Mechaber means to say is Mashiv HaRuach levad. He's addressing a case where in the Yemais HaChama the guy said Mashiv HaRuach alone. He didn't say Morid HaGoshem. Or in the winter months, he failed to say Mashiv HaRuach, but he said Morid HaGoshem. Ois cutting yod aleph. In both those cases, Ein machzirin. You don't make him repeat Shemona Esrei on the account of a mistake by Mashiv HaRuach. Why? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, the ruchais v'chein tal ein ne'etzarin balav hachi. Wind and dew, those are negeya all year round. Rain, there's a rainy season and a non-rainy season. Therefore, during the rainy season, we need you to say Morid HaGoshem. You have to thank the Rabbeinu Shalom. You have to be mazkir the Rabbeinu Shalom's gevura, the Rabbeinu Shalom's power of bringing the rain. If you fail to do so during the rainy season, you're going to have to repeat Shemona Esrei. But wind is there during the rainy season. It's there during the spring and summer seasons. Wind is a year-round event. And therefore, if you mention it during the spring and the summer, so what? The wind blows during the spring and the summer too. You didn't mention it during the winter months. You're not mechuyev to mention it specifically during the winter months because it's not a particular need during the winter months. It's needed all year round. Not only that, but says the Mishnah Berurah, Ein ne'etzarin balav hachi. The wind and the dew are not going to be stopped. And this is a Gemara in Tainus. The Gemara in Tainus says that the wind and the dew cannot be stopped. The Rebbeinu Shalom is not going to stop the wind. The Rebbeinu Shalom is not going to stop the dew. Matter of fact, the Gemara says the same way the world can't exist without wind, the world can't exist without Yidden. Without Froma Yidden that are Oved Hashem, the world can't exist. So there's an analogy to wind. The world can't exist without the air currents. And therefore the air currents are never going to stop. That's a chesed of the Rebbeinu Shalom's, that the air currents are never going to stop. So we're not going to make you say Shemona Esrei over again on account of an error in Mashiv HaRuach. Again, says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting an olive. The ruchais v'chein tal ein netzarin balavachi. They're not going to stop. Va'amirasai loy ma'ila v'loy morid. And your amir is not so important. It's not a ma'ila. It's not something that's going to be a benefit, and it's not something that's going to be a loss. Umikamakim, nevertheless, lechatchila noyagin b'chol b'kaimais loy mashiv HaRuach pa'askara b'mais hageshamim. L'maisa, the minig is that during the rainy season you say Mashiv HaRuach Morid HaGoshem. You do mention Ruach. Why? If we're saying that Ruach is a year-round event and it's not such a big deal that you have to mention it. So why do we make sure to say it during the Yemais HaGeshamim? Why do we say Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGoshem? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, because during the Yemais HaGeshamim, the wind has an extra benefit. It's necessary all year round, but during the rainy season, it has a specific extra benefit. What's that? Shemayel Ozlan Nagev Lachos Ha'aretz Shehi Meruba. During the rainy season, the ground is saturated. The wind helps dry out the saturated land, which is something which is very necessary. The Bach also brings down that there's an extra benefit during the rainy season because we know that very often the rains are brought by the winds. What delivers the rain clouds? The winds. Eis cotton yud beis, ein machzirin oisai, va'afilo adayin loisiyem abracha. We don't make you go back even if you did not yet say Baruch Atah Hashem Echayam Esim. You still don't have to go back. Because there's never a chiv to mention ruach or tal. We say Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGoshem, but the ruach part of that phrase is not a chiv. We don't need it. According to the Minig Svarad, we say Morid Atol, but it's not apparently necessary. Eis cotton yud gimel. No, we gotta go weiter in the Mechaber. 5 lines down, middle of the line. V'chein betal, very similar halacha, applies in the world of the Mechaber by Morid Atol. Im hizkiroi b'yemais hageshamim. Let's say somebody says Morid Atol during the rainy season. Right? During the rainy season, you're supposed to say Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGoshem during the winter months. What if somebody says Morid Atol? Or during the spring season, somebody neglects to say Morid Atol. Ein machzir noisai. You don't make him go back because tal is a year-round thing. Obviously, the Mechaber is speaking in the world according to his minig Svarad. According to whom the minig is to say Morid Atol in the spring and summer months. Afilu hachi, still in all, ein machzirin, you don't make somebody go back for not saying it, because there was never any chiv given by the Chachamim to say Morid Atol. Now we go to the words of the Ramah 6 lines down. Hagah. Va'anu b'nei Ashkenaz, us b'nei Ashkenaz, loy mazkirin tal, we never say Morid Atol. This is Nusach Ashkenaz. Loy b'mais hachama, not during the spring and summer months, when we don't say Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGoshem. V'loy b'mais hageshamim, and not during the rainy season. We also don't mention tal. Rak oimrim b'mais hachama. Instead, Nusach Ashkenaz is that during the spring and summer months we say Rav lo Hishia, and we go straight into B'chalkal Chaim B'Chesed. Ato gibur lo'elam Hashem B'chaim Eisam ato Rav lo Hishia B'chalkal Chaim B'Chesed. We just leave out Ma'aseh V'Ruach HaMorid HaGoshem during the summer months, but we don't add in Morid Atol. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your knowledge. V'loy b'mais hageshamim, v'rak b'she'ela anu noegin levakesh gamal tal. Where we do mention tal is in the bracha of Baruch Aleinu, when we're davening for rain, right? In the bracha of B'chai Mesa, we're not davening for rain. We're mentioning the Rabbeinu Shalom's power of rain. But it's not a request. In the bracha of Baruch Aleinu, it's a request. V'sein talumat levracha. We asked the Rabbeinu Shalom that he should give dew and rain lebracha. Over there we mention tal, says the Mishnah Berurah. The reason why is because now we're asking, yes, there's dew all year round, but now we're specifically asking that it should be lebracha. Ki yesh tal she'ein lebracha, because there's a type of dew which is not a bracha. So why don't we ask for tal levracha all year round, even during the spring and summer? Says the Mishnah Berurah, in the Yemais HaChama, when we're not going to ask for rain, we don't ask for tal. But in the winter months, where we're inserting a request already, so we join in the word tal, so that the tal should be lebracha. But it's not something that we request during the spring and summer months. However, even according to Nusach Ashkenaz, if you do mention tal either in the Hazkara, either in the Bracha B'Chayim Mesa when we mention Tal, Ubein B'She'ela, or in the Bracha of Baruch Aleinu when we ask for it, Kigoin Sha'amar V'Sein Tal, V'lo Yisker Motor. Let's say in the Bracha of Baruch Aleinu, somebody, instead of saying V'Sein Bracha during the spring and summer months, he says V'Sein Tal. He doesn't say Motor. He says V'Sein Tal of Bracha. You're not going to make him repeat Shemona Esrei. Okay, says the Ramah weiter. 4 lines from the bottom middle of the line. Yesh Oimrim. There are those that say Sheshliach Tzibur Paisik Lahaskir, that the Shliach Tzibur should cease saying Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem B'Tfilos Musaf Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, by Musaf on the first day of Pesach. Aval HaKohol Mazkirin, but the Tzibur should say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shemona Esrei. Again, now we're shifting from when you start to say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. That was the whole conversation that we had earlier in this year, right? Musaf Shmini Atzeres, there has to be an announcement first. Now we're shifting to Pesach, when we stop saying Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. What did we say in Sif Aleph? We said in Sif Aleph, Ve'ein Poiskin, we don't stop saying Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem ad Tfilos Musaf until Musaf Sheyom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. Musaf on the first day of Pesach. But when? When's the last time we say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem? Is the last time we say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem by the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Shachris? And now by the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Musaf, we no longer say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem? Or do we still say it by the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Musaf? And now the Shliach Tzibur is the first one to not say it by the Chazaras HaShatz of Musaf. Which way do we go? Says the Ramah, Yesh Oimrim, Sheshliach Tzibur Paisik Lahaskir B'Tfilos Musaf Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. There are those that say that the Shliach Tzibur will not say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem by Chazaras HaShatz of Musaf on the first day of Pesach. Aval HaKol, but the Tzibur in the Shtil Shemona Esrei and the Chazan in the Shtil Shemona Esrei, Mazkirin. Then you do say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Ve'enon Poiskin, so the Kehillah will not stop saying Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem ad Mincha, the first Shemona Esrei when the Tzibur won't say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem will be Mincha on the first day of Pesach. Sheshamu kvar mishliach tzibur shepasak b'tfilas hamusaf. Why? Because according to this shita, everybody says Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Musaf, first day of Pesach. By Chazaras HaShatz of Musaf, the first day of Pesach, the Shliach Tzibur will not say it. That's going to serve as the hacharaza to stop saying Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Then by Mincha, already nobody will say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem in the Shtil Shemona Esrei. This is what the Ramah brings down in a Yesh Oimrim. And he says, V'chein Noyagin, and indeed, that is the minig. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ad Mincha, you won't stop, the Tzibur will not stop saying Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem until the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Mincha. Dibe Musaf adayin ein heker la'Tzibur. Why? Because what's going to make everybody stop by the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Musaf? There was no achraza. They don't know that you're supposed to stop saying it. So Memela, everybody says it. V'ayin le'el b'Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Gimel. Ois Katan Tezayin Sheshamu. But after the Chazaras HaShatz of Musaf, now already everybody heard that the Chazan didn't say it. V'im yachid eichar tzilasai at shehiskal ha'shliach tzibur lehispal Musaf upasak v'lahaska geshem. Now, let's say there was one guy who didn't daven the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Musaf yet. Right? He went out. He was in the Beis HaKisei. Now he came back and he's going to daven Musaf after Chazaras HaShatz already started. And the Chazan didn't say Mashav Ruach HaMorid HaGashem. Shuv lo yoma Mashav Ruach. So now he can't say Mashav Ruach anymore. V'yachad adar b'yishuv. How about somebody who lives alone in the boondocks? Yemaher ozl hispal musaf. He should make sure to daven musaf early. Kaidem shemispal in hakihilos, before most of the kihilos daven musaf, and he'll say Mashav Ruach. So says the Pri Megadim. The Chavetz Chaim says, it appears to me, if this person has a suffix that maybe the tzibur already daven and the shots already left out, Mashav Ruach Amar Agasham, mutar shelo loymar, it would be better that he shouldn't say it. Because b'di'evet you yotze l'kuli alma if you don't say Mashav Ruach Amar Agasham by Musaf on the first day of Pesach, because that's the appropriate time to stop saying it. V'chanal b'soif siv katan Gimel, and we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sif Dalet. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discussing limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch should send Yeshua's refuahs parnasit sheduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the bias called tzedek. B'meher v'yameinu amen. Be well.